But let's go over to Natalie Good now, who appeared on The X Factor and The Voice. Natalie, do you recognise that the charges in this report that men routinely sexually abuse female contestants in these competitions make you feel uncomfortable? Was that your experience?
Me personally, not with any competition I've done, but from my female friends' experiences are very different to mine. I want to highlight not all men are like that in our industry. There are some very good ones, but it is real and it does exist, yes.
I mean, have you got any particular, without naming names, of course, anecdotes, the sort of things that is appropriate for this time of day, that you have heard female friends tell you about some of their experiences?
Yeah, I can confirm that, but I won't disclose it in further detail, just to protect everyone's identities and privacy.
But what are we talking about? Are we talking about touching? Are we talking about comments? Are we talking about prolonged harassment with people constantly phoning? Or, I mean, what sort of things have your female friends experienced in the industry?
Coercive control, for one. Comments, like comments on weight, comments on appearance, and if... I don't know what I can say here. There's a lot to say.
I think we understand what you're saying, Natalie, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. Let's go back to Caroline. I think your report is excellent, Caroline, but, you know, by necessity, there's stuff in it that we can't know. I mean, there's one story, Katie Waisel, a former contestant on The X Factor, told the Inquiry that at the age of 16, she was grabbed by a much older man and placed on his lap in the recording studio while they were reviewing the track she was recording. Now, that probably is one of the lesser offences that you've heard about. What can we do, while your report is an excellent step, what can we do to make this more public, to make men realise that they can't behave like this?
Well, there's a really good point that Natalie just said. It's not all men, and we need male music executives, people at the top of the industry, to be allies and champions. We need to see an end to non-disclosure agreements that are protecting perpetrators and leaving women vulnerable. There's a really good organisation being set up, the Creative Industries Independent Standards Authority, CISA. They need to be given the teeth to be effective. They need buy-in and financial support from the industry. Ultimately, we need to recognise that too many women were too scared to speak of their experiences. They would only do it behind closed doors. They couldn't articulate exactly what had happened to them for fear of being sued or for fear of being shut down by the industry, not given contracts, prevented from working. And many of them obviously rely on insecure freelance work for their income to support their families. So we call for, I think there are 34 separate recommendations to the industry, to government, spreading it across a whole range of areas so that actually industry could step up. It could be defending women, it could be supporting them, giving them the same opportunities as men. And that simply hasn't been happening. And, you know, the worst story I think I heard came from Annie McManus. She was talking about somebody she knew who was a photographer who had refused the sexual advances of a performer. And she described that as a no-win situation. She refused the advances, she gets kicked off the tour bus and not given the job. If she'd accepted the advances, she would have been unprofessional and castigated for that. And that is the situation too many women in that industry are in.
Natalie, I'm going to come back to you. It's interesting, Caroline there pointing out things like NDAs. The problem is the sort of distorted element of this industry. It's an industry that's highly competitive, where people are sort of fighting hard to try and get their big break, and there are very few opportunities out there to make it big. And so it is by nature an industry where those who are essentially employees or freelancers or hoping to get contracts or creating a track in a recording studio feel very much at the mercy of their superiors. Is that the way you felt in the industry?
Previously, yes, in my earlier years, which is why I have learned how to produce myself and mix, and I'm learning how to master, and I know how to engineer my vocals. I've had to learn all of these skills myself from having my own negative experiences, which I won't disclose on here. But there The game is changing here now. You know, there's a lot of women in power in music now. It's on the horizon. It's changing slowly, which is nice to see.
Okay, Caroline, come back to you. I mean, what we're talking about here in terms of men in the recording industry, particularly with these shows like The X Factor and The Voice that Natalie was on, you know, you're talking about young, optimistic kids. They don't know anything about the industry. They come into this programme, The X Factor or The Voice or whatever, and now we learn that men are abusing their position of power, or were abusing their position of power within the framework of these talent shows. I mean, that's pretty low behaviour. I mean, were you shocked personally by what you heard? And do you think now, through your report, that men in the industry, those who have sinned, shall we say, will realise the error of their ways?
I want it to be a massive wake-up call to individuals across the industry, recognising that for too long women have been treated in this way. Now, look, there's a long way to go, and it takes time to bring about a cultural shift. But the reality is that how many more young women are we prepared to be abused? How many, particularly Black artists, how many more of them will we see treated as sexual objects, asked for sexual favours in return for gigs or for performing opportunities? And it wasn't just in pop music. It wasn't just concerts and festivals. We heard that this was happening in classical music as well, in colleges, in conservatoires. And some of the worst evidence that we heard was in the roundtables that we did behind closed doors, when women were just too afraid to speak in public, but in private they were telling us things that were just horrific, absolutely horrific. And to be frank, abuse, some of it probably criminal, but they were too scared, just too scared to report it.
Caroline, I want to come back to what you're saying there, because I think you said earlier, you mentioned in passing about banning NDAs might be at the root of this, and I tend to agree. I may have some skin in this game, if you will. And I would suggest that actually what ends up happening is the victims of sexual harassment end up being legally gagged so they can't speak in order to protect the perpetrator of their abuse. And then even if they did pluck up the carriage or even get some sort of court order to overturn the NDA, they're too quickly labelled as problematic Me Too movement, social justice warriors. That's at the heart of it, isn't it?
It's absolutely at the heart of it, Alex. You're so right. It's that women who speak out are regarded as a problem. NDAs are frightening, and in too many instances, women have felt forced to sign them because it's going to give them the financial security for a while. And they want to carry on working in the industry. Look, I spoke to some amazing women. Zelda Perkins, who had an NDA put on her by Harvey Weinstein, she had the guts to break that NDA and deserves absolute credit for doing so. But we shouldn't be allowing NDAs to be used in instances where there is sexual abuse and misconduct of this type. There can be good commercial reasons in other circumstances for NDAs, and I accept that. I don't want them banned in their entirety, but they shouldn't be used to protect perpetrators, silence victims, and allow this cycle of abuse to continue.
Why would you need to sign an NDA as a contestant in a talent show?
I don't think you would. I think there are all sorts of other commercial spheres where NDAs could be useful and important, where there's product development. Certainly not in this area, no.
And Natalie, can I ask you, did you have to sign any NDAs in your career?
Yeah, but that's only when I've had to perform, when I've been doing jobs performing for high-profile clients. I had to sign NDAs for those reasons, but I couldn't backtrack to a time where I've had to sign an NDA to protect a crime. That's my personal experience anyway.
I mean, didn't you find that a bit strange in any circumstances? I mean, you're hired to be a singer, I'm sure you're a very trustworthy person. What I'm saying is any guy who tries to get you to sign an NDA, be suspicious.
Interesting. I never thought about it from that perspective, actually. Thank you. Because I always just assumed it's for the right reasons to protect the high-profile client from being in the public eye.
I understand that, yeah.
Natalie, what do you think fundamentally is the biggest thing that needs to change in the industry? I think it is absolutely valiant and incredible that you have taken on mastering all of these alternative skills so you can produce your own music and not have to rely on anybody else. But that kind of sticks in my craw at the same time, that you feel you've had to do that so you're not at the mercy of some of these rotten men.
Ooh. What was the question with that?
What do you
Sorry.
think is the biggest thing that needs to change in the industry?
Biggest thing that needs to change? It shouldn't always be about looks. Yeah. And I think there definitely need to be more women running labels, more women A&Rs, just more women at the top, like running it, you know? It's getting there, not quite there yet. More female engineers, more female producers being hired by labels as well. Like that, I would like to see.
Good idea. Good thoughts there, Natalie, because it does seem to be a very male-dominated industry. Same question, final question to you, Caroline. What, subsequent to your excellent report, do you think now needs to change in the music industry?
Look, the government will have to respond to us within 12 weeks. I think what I want to see is a commitment on NDAs. I want to see CISA, the Independent Standards Authority, given the backing that it needs to work. I want to see the music industry providing better statistics on the number of women employed, the number of women signed, the gender pay gap, ethnicity pay gap, has dig down into all of the issues that are currently being hidden away from us, that it's harder for a woman to get signed, it's harder for a woman to headline at a festival, it's harder for a woman to perform in an arena where you are a freelancer, where there is no job security, and where you're being pressured by powerful, influential men to perform favours for them in order to get work. It's just wrong.
I agree with that. Caroline Nokes, congratulations on your report. Excellent work. Thank you for joining us. And thank you so much to Natalie Good for sharing your story as well. Thank you.
Banny?